January is that time of year. Budgets reset, priorities reset, and everybody talks about doing things differently. Have you ever paid for a full year gym membership and then it stopped going by February? I mean, don't feel bad. All of us have done that. It has nothing to do with lack of motivation or discipline. It has everything to do with how behavior actually works. Behavioral science calls this the fresh start effect. The idea that natural transitions like New Year make it easier for people to change their behavior. But openness to change doesn't necessarily mean follow through. According to UK survey data from YouGov, around 6 in 10 adults intend to set New Year's resolution, with health, finances, and self-improvement among the most common goals. All of these are important goals, but data from Strava, based on over 800 million logged activities, shows that most New Year's resolutions are abandoned by January 19, less than 3 weeks in. Do you know why? Because resolutions are vague. Be healthier, eat healthier, be more efficient. They sound responsible, but they don't translate into actual behavior, especially when we are under pressure. So today I want to share 3 behavior design principles that make intentions stick. And I will anchor them in research or field studies while keeping it practical for organizations as well as individuals. One of the strongest behavioral insights is active commitment. A useful illustration comes from a 2012 NHS field study. The problem they were trying to tackle was missed GP appointments, a costly issue for the NHS here in the UK. Traditionally, patients were given their appointment cards with all the information and details printed on it. The researchers tested a very small change. Instead of receiving the appointment passively, the appointment details passively, patients were given a blank card and they were asked to write the date and the details of their next appointment themselves. There was no incentive. They didn't send them any reminders. There was no extra information. It was only a shift from being told to actively making that commitment. That small change led to a meaningful reduction in missed appointments compared to the standard practice and process. It's not obviously about the magic of writing things down. When people actively participate in forming a commitment, follow-through improves. And this aligns with a broader behavioral science research showing that self-commitments are more likely to stick than passive acknowledgements. This isn't about memory. It's about ownership and it's about consistency. When people articulate a commitment in their own words, when they write it down or say it out loud, they're no longer agreeing with someone else's instructions. They are aligning their behavior with their own stated intention. So when we rely on passive commitments, like please read this document or policy and acknowledge, or tick this box to acknowledge that you have completed this training, from a behavioral point of view, it's very similar to handing over that printed appointment card. So the question is, how do we move teams from passive agreements to active ownership? Sometimes very, very small changes can do wonders. Something like asking teams to document one concrete action, one concrete behavior that can reduce risk, and sharing it with others, or any other small intervention can work. Sharing a commitment with peers or with friends creates a positive social pressure. When others heard you said you would do something, you feel that you've got to make that commitment. So by writing it down, saying it out loud, and making it public, we create that positive social pressure. Another powerful way to help intention turn into execution is friction. You can remove friction to help people move toward a desired behavior, or you can add some small amount of friction to slow people down, to help them pause and discourage them from doing an unwanted behavior. This idea sits at the heart of what Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein popularized as nudges. Subtle changes to the environment that shape behavior without really forcing it. To understand why friction is so powerful, Daniel Kahneman describes two modes of thinking. System 1 thinking, that is that fast, automatic, intuitive thinking. And this is what we rely on when we are busy or when we are under pressure. And system 2 thinking is that slow, deliberate, effortful thinking, what we use when we pause and think things through. When we have tight deadlines or multiple priorities or a lot of cognitive overload, most work happens under system 1 conditions. And friction works because it can do one of these two things. We can remove it, as I said, so the right behavior happens almost automatically, or add friction to interrupt autopilot, forcing a brief shift to system 2 thinking. That interruption, that pause, is often where risk is reduced. And you can see how, in many cases, behavior follows the path of least resistance, especially in the consumer world. We have gone from cash to contactless cards to one-click checkout to Amazon Go stores, where you simply pick up whatever it is you need and walk out. There is no checkout, there is no pause, there is no friction. And that is not accidental, it's behavior design, because they want people to buy more. So the question for organizations becomes, where are we accidentally making the risky behavior easier than the desired one? If you want people to adopt a new behavior, removing or adding friction often works better than trying to persuade them. So think about it. For example, how can you reduce the number of unnecessary decisions your team needs to make? Every extra decision is a chance to stall. Ask yourself, how many choices does someone have to make before they can even start a task? Do they already know the information or the details that they need? If they don't, is it easy to find that information, or do they need to dig and hunt for that information? How can you reduce the number of steps? New behaviors feel daunting when they look complex. If a process can be done in 1 step or 2 or 3 steps maximum, people are far more likely to try it, especially under pressure. How can you reduce perceived effort and barriers? Even small barriers add up. Unclear ownership, missing templates, slow approvals, unclear thresholds. Each one nudges people back to the old behavior or the old habits. And removing these increase follow-through. But friction isn't only about making things easier. Sometimes the right intervention is to add a small pause. For example, before submitting a campaign for approval, before publishing a highly regulated content, before bypassing a review step. This is where friction deliberately slows people down so that they can think before taking action. And that pause helps shift thinking from system 1 to system 2, from just get it out to, is it really right? Do I really need to do it now? Some examples could be short confirmation questions, a checklist, a moment where someone has to explicitly confirm risk ownership. And the goal is not to block progress, it is to create just enough hesitation to trigger better judgment. But there is an important warning here. When friction becomes excessive or unjustified, it turns into what Cass Sunstein calls sludge, unnecessary barriers whose cost far outweighed their benefits. Too many policy documents, endless approval layers, duplication of work or processes nobody really understands. At that point, friction doesn't improve decisions, it drives workarounds. And workarounds are usually where risk quietly shows up, grows. So the takeaway isn't just to always remove friction or always add friction. It's designing friction intentionally. Remove it where you want the behavior to happen automatically and quickly. Add some friction where you want people to pause and think. And relentlessly remove a sludge that drains effort without improving outcomes. Behavior doesn't fail from lack of intent. It fails when the system makes the wrong behavior the easiest one. And this is where friction connects directly to risk, because when everything is optimized for speed, teams are nudged towards short-term thinking, short-term wins, while the long-term consequences are deferred to a future mode, to a future state. Have you ever bought something quite expensive with these buy now, pay later schemes? You buy today, you pay later. Sometimes there's even no interest to pay. And somehow that makes the purchase feel easier. Even though realistically, most of us have no strong reason to believe that we will be in a better financial situation 6 months down the road. So what's happening here? What's happening is what is called hyperbolic conditioning, discounting. We tend to overweight immediate rewards and heavily discount future costs. The value of having something right now feels real, but the cost of paying later feels abstract. It feels distant, it feels smaller than it really is. And that is why products like buy now, pay later are so popular. They are designed around this bias. You're not spending less, but it feels less painful because the cost is deferred. It feels less painful in the moment. Now, let's translate this into workplace. Teams face versions of these decisions every day. Do we take this shortcut right now to hit the deadline today? Do we skip one review step just this once? Do we reuse this wording because it worked before, even if it's borderline? Do we park the risk discussions for later because we need to act urgently and we need to move fast? In the moment, the payoff is immediate. It's speed, progress, relief, fewer awkward conversations, and the cost that could be regulatory scrutiny, rework, or reputational damage belong to a future version. And that future cost is psychologically discounted. And this is where more training or more awareness about what people need to do and how they need to do it won't necessarily land. We assume that if people understand the risk, they will make that good long-term decision or choice. But when pressure is high and time is tight, present self-thinking dominates. What can help is making downstream consequences more visible, more immediate. We can pull the consequences into present moment through prompts, relatable stories and examples, or feedback. This way, people can visualize the consequences now, not months later when the cost is fully there. So, how do we design conditions where the right behavior happens? Imagine you decide, I'm going to do yoga every day this year. The intention is clear, but a few weeks in, it quietly disappears. Now, compare this to this version. Every morning when I wake up, after I wash my face, I roll out my yoga mat and I do yoga for 5 minutes. And you put your yoga mat near your bed where you can easily see it. It's visible. So you're designing your environment and making the task clear with the specific details when and how long you will be doing it, instead of just some vague goal of doing yoga every day. And this will work because you are not relying on willpower. You are relying on design. What changed was the trigger after washing my face or after waking up, the environment, that yoga mat near bed, and the effort required, 5 minutes, not 1 hour. The timing is important and it is anchored to an existing routine. This is called habit stacking, attaching a new behavior to something that already exists. One of the most widely used frameworks for understanding why this works is the COM-B model, which is developed by Susan Mickey and her colleagues. At a high level, COM-B model says that change in behavior happens when 3 conditions are met. Capability, when people have the skills and knowledge to do that behavior. Opportunity, when the environment, time, tools, prompts make it possible for that to happen. And motivation, when there is sufficient reason and drive for someone to act. If any of these is missing, behavior breaks down. So in the yoga example, you know how to do basic yoga moves. All right, you want to feel better and the mat is there. The timing is clear and the effort is small. If you remove the opportunity, if there is no mat or there is no trigger or there is no clear timing, the behavior collapses after a few days or a few weeks, even when you are so motivated to do it. The same dynamic plays out at work, just with higher stakes. So, does your team really understand the compliance requirements and why they matter? Do they care deeply about avoiding risk? Do they genuinely want to do the right thing? Are the review steps clearly triggered? Do they have easy access to the checklist, to the information that they need, or the checklist live in a separate system? Does the process and cognitive load work for them, or is it just a lot of cognitive load at the worst possible moment? Do deadlines collide with unclear ownership? For behavior to happen, all these conditions should be present: capability, environment, opportunity or environment, and motivation. That is why too much focus on awareness and training alone won't work, because habits don't live in our heads. So as we start this new year, a useful question could be, what conditions could make the right behavior the easy behavior? These 3 principles can help moving from intention into sustained action. Active commitment, move people from passive agreement to ownership. Intentional friction, remove it when you want flow, add it where you want pause. And habit stacking, attach a new behavior to one that already exists. This is how behavior change holds up under pressure. It's not through motivation, it's through design.